deviation using step deviation. Now I have sampled out a problem which we are going to solve using the formula that you can see in this slide. Now in this information we have age in years and it has been categorized into classes, and we have number of employees, also known as frequency. Now we shall use this data to illustrate how you can work standard deviation using a step deviation formula. Now our formula, as you can see, is h times square root of summation of fd squared all over summation of f minus summation of fd all over summation of f. Don't worry, I'll explain the rest in the next procedure. Now when we look at mean, also known as x bar, is equal to a plus summation of fd all over summation of f times h. Now what is a, what is d, what is h? I have explained that here. To get d, we use the formula x minus a. A is an assumed mean. A is an assumed mean, and divide by h. H is the class width. Now I will explain that in the next frequency distribution table, as we can see in the next. This is a frequency distribution table with columns class, frequency, midpoint, and then D. I'll explain the rest as we move by. Class we have been given in the problem we looked at above. Frequency we are also given. Now midpoint is what I'll explain how we arrived into the midpoint. Midpoint, we take the upper class limit plus the lower class limit. Once we get the sum, we divide by 2. That will give us 25.5. You can confirm that with your calculator and see what we have. Now once we get 25.5, let's all fill this table together. 30 plus 39.5, we get 69.5. If you divide by 2, you get 35.5. Now proceed up to the last column. Thank you. Now I'm assuming you have calculated your midpoint. What I'm going to explain next is how you get D, the column for D. Now to get the column of D, I've used the formula x minus a over h. A is the assumed mean, h is the class width. How do I get A? How do I get A? Now we have explained that A is an assumed mean. Assumed mean, we get it in this column for x. This column for x, we get it from here. The assumed mean, we'll get it in that column of x. Now it can be any value. If we are talking about assumed mean, it can be any value. It can be 65.5, it can be 55.5 or 45.5. However, today in this illustration, we shall use 55.5 as our assumed mean. Very well. Now h as the class width. How do I get the class width? For the class width, I recommend we can easily obtain it from here without having to rely on the upper class boundaries and lower class limits. Now this is what we are going to do together with you. Say 35.5 minus 25.5. What is your answer? Hopefully it is 10. What about 45.5 minus 35.5? Your answer will be 10. Very well. That is how we are going to obtain our class height in this problem. Now we have h, we have a. What about x? X are these values. Now this is how we proceed for the D column. We say x minus a. Our x here, we take the first x as 25.5. X will be 25.5. Then minus a. We said I will pick my assumed mean as 55.5. My assumed mean, I've used 55.5. Now 25.5 minus 55.5 gives us negative 30. You can confirm that with your calculator. And negative 30 divided by h. H we said is 10. Divide by 10 will give us negative 3. That is how we get this -3. We are going to use the same criteria to get this answer here. How do we do it? X minus a. X is 35.5. X is 35.5. Then minus a. A is assumed mean. We said is 55.5. Very good. You divide by h. You divide by h. Now once you divide that by h, you'll get your answer as -2. Please, let's continue. Fill this column until we get here. I've explained that, how we get D. Now, the next column that will guide us through getting mean and standard deviation is known as FD. FD simply means take the frequency times the deviation or the value of D. Now, look at this column. In this our first column or our class 20 to 29, F in this case is, F in this case is 50, also known as the frequency. Now 50, we are going to take 50, let me use that, I hope it is clear now, 50, and then we multiply by this D of ours, which was -3. That is why I've used this 50 times -3. Our answer will be -150. We'll use the same procedure to get our value here. How do we do it? We have 60, let me use that nice one, 60 times -2. 60 times -2. That gives us -20. We fill that all the way up to the end. Very good, very good. Now, next procedure, we are looking at D squared column. D squared column. What does D squared mean? D simply means you go and take the value of D. Go and take the value of D, which in our case is -3. We can see I have indicated here -3 squared. The sum, the product is 9. Very well. The product is 9, as you can see there. Now, to verify that, to explain further, we said D squared. In this case, we have -2. -2. I believe you are looking at that well. -2 squared gives us 4. That is how we end up with that value. Very well. We have filled the column for D squared. Next, we have a special column known as FD squared. FD squared. FD squared, according to that information, simply means you take value F. In this case, F is 50. F is 50. What about D squared? D squared we have just found. D squared as -9. D squared is -9. Now, D squared is 9. Now, 50 times 9 is 450, as you can verify with your calculator. Very well. Then the next is 60 times 4. 60 times 4. I believe you are seeing where 4 is coming from and where 60 is coming from. That gives us 240. Now, I have just explained how we fill all this column. Now, what is so important in this table? The first and most important is getting the summation of F. It's getting the summation of F. That is what we are interested in getting the summation of F. Summation of F simply means you add all the values in this column, starting from 50, 60, 70, all the way to 11. You can double check that with your calculator, you get 373. Very well. Another most and very important column is known as summation of FD. Summation of FD. We need it to calculate mean. Now, how do we get summation of FD? Add everything from -50 to -120 to -170. When you add them together, we are going to get -25. Very good. Now, once you are done with that, the next and most important sector again is called summation of FD squared. Summation of FD squared. Now, all those values we obtained here from -450 to 40, 70, 0, 52, all the way up to 99. If you add them together, we get 629. Congratulations, you have just filled your first frequency distribution table. Now let's see how we are going to substitute our values. Let's see how we are going to substitute our values. Now, using the formula for mean which I stated above, we said mean is equal to A, assumed mean, plus summation of f d all over summation of f, all that you multiply by h. Now, as you look at our frequency distribution table, we said let the assumed mean be 55.5. That's what we'll use as the assumed mean. Then you add h. H we said is the class width. H we said is the class width. Now h we said is 10. Then all that you multiply by, all that we shall multiply it by. Now summation of fd, summation of fd. You look at our frequency distribution column, summation of fd is -25, and summation of f is 373. Now when you work that one out, you'll get you start here, and after getting the quotient you multiply by 10, and after getting the product there, then you'll take 55.5 plus the answer. Now that answer will give us 54.5001, which is equal to approximately 54.5. Success. We have just calculated our mean using the step deviation formula. Now when you go into standard deviation, when we are looking at standard deviation, our formula for standard deviation we said is class width times the square root of summation of fd squared all over summation of f minus summation of fd all over summation of f. All that should be squared somewhere here. All that should be squared there. Very well. Now once you state your formula, your task is substituting the formula, the values in your formula. Now we said h is the class frequency, h is the class width, which in our case is 10. Then all that you multiply by the square root of. In our previous working on the frequency distribution table, we found that summation of fd squared is 621, and summation of f is 373. Very good. Now from that you subtract summation of fd from our working. Summation of fd is -25. That's what we substitute, and then summation of f is 373. Now once you get this quotient, all of that you're supposed to be squaring it. Now once you square, it's advisable you first work everything inside here. Once you work whatever is inside there, you square it. You get its square root. So for this first part 621 over 373, this is what we got, this is what we have. And then for this part, after you divide and square, this is what we get. Now if you take this value here, and then subtract this other one, we'll get a value which we shall get its square root. Now the square root will give us around 0.6786 proceeding, but then that value will multiply by 10. When you multiply by 10, we get 6.786. Thank you. You have just succeeded in calculating the standard deviation using step deviation formula. Thank you for meeting me. I'm Mr. Steven. More lessons and tutors will be coming in. If you have any question, please let me know. If you like my video, you can share, you can comment, and you can subscribe to my channel. Thank you for taking your time.